Saoirse Gaofa Harja agus a camarada ha. Is me an punk finín jarag agus tá mar a ríis. Greetings friends, comrades and cadres. Fred Finian Punk here, and I'm back. I've been away for a couple of weeks because, well, I was ill. Came down with something which I was told was a cold. Which is the funniest cold I've ever had because I was vomiting, throwing up and feverish, coughing up projectile phlegm. Not that I want to tell you too much of that detail. Excuse the fire's getting a bit windy today. So I was told it was a cold, or I don't want to shit talk medical staff and trained medical professionals, but I start to wonder, is this just the state of the National Health Service? Are they making the National Health Service so fucking bad? Excuse me, I'm still croaky, I'm sure you can hear. Is the National Health Service being drained so much that they're deliberately trying to turn it into an absolute travesty? Which I understand from comrades and friends in the United States that their media is constantly plugging how awful British healthcare system is, and that how the Americans have got it made because theirs is insurance and insurance-based privatized industry. I'm wondering if they're trying to make it so bad as the American media claims that it is, just so they can find an excuse to privatize it. Of course, the sun-reading masses here who are generationally divided don't listen to older generations or younger generations between them, so they just dismiss older people and say, oh, shut up, the National Health Service is a load of crap, I want private healthcare because it means I've made it and I'm now middle class. This kind of crap was introduced in the 80s under the Thatcher regime and the Reagan regime in the United States, and the complete neoliberal sort of backlash, if you will, against any social reforms that had been brought about in the 1940s and 50s for the baby boom generation and early Gen Xers to enjoy. Now we're left in a complete travesty. We have pretty much virtual fascists in the White House. We have wars just perpetually going on. The state of peace is just unknown to us now. And we're having the supposedly progressive politicians like Hillary Clinton once calling the Trump supporters a basket of deplorables. She's last I saw was some video on Twitter of her praising Donald Trump for supposedly bringing peace to the so-called Middle East. That's Western Asia, by the way. They tried to make out that peace had been brought about by Trump in the genocide of... meanwhile, the genocide of Palestinians is still going on, and they don't talk about that now. They just pretend that there's some ceasefire and peace deal or whatever. And the Democrats cave into this, as do the Labour Party in this country, who are supposed to be more left-wing than the Democrats, have become so far to the right that they're pretty much like black shirts of the 1930s. They've brought in draconian laws. I mean, transgender people aren't recognised for anything other than what their assigned gender is at birth, so let that be one thing to show you. They've criminalised groups who try to prevent genocide in Palestine. I mean, I could go on. Where else do I go? I mean, meanwhile, Kamala Harris, who thinks she's a progressive, but she calls herself that. And instead of blowing smoke up Trump's arse, she calls him a communist dictator. You're either too stupid to know what a communist is, but I don't think you're that stupid. You're too fucking dishonest to admit that you know what a communist is, and you are trying to make out that communism and fascism are one and the same thing, as liberals always fucking do. The more disingenuous pile of bastards that ever walked the face of the earth, I don't think they were ever any worse than liberals. At least a fascist, you know what you're getting, you know what I mean? Excuse me, I'm just burning mouldy clothes. Burning out the rot. I wish we could do that with capitalism. I know I keep saying that in these videos, but it remains true. You know, if we could only just do this with it, hey? It clings on like a dirty, sticky turd from an arse hair, swinging in the fucking toilet bowl like a pendulum and making the whole toilet stink. Yes, that's a vulgar lavatorial analogy, but it's pretty true and pretty apt of what late-stage capitalism is. A piece of shit clinging on for its own existence. Like rotten mildew that gets into your fucking clothes and you end up having to burn them in your own in your own backyard. Shocking, isn't it? Now, I saw a discharge just over 2 weeks ago on Halloween at the Clooney in Newcastle. They were amazing. The sad downside of that was I came down with some kind of nasty cough, which developed into a feverish chest infection, and I ended up throwing up with an empty stomach. Couldn't eat, and then I was told it was a cold. I don't know, like I say, colds can be really underrated in terms of how serious they are, but that sounds a bit extreme. even by modern mutated virus standards, you know what I mean? Like I was saying, are they just trying to make the National Health Service as useless as the American media claims it is? The mind boggles. What else has been going on? Sudan, which is ignored by all the posturing, I hate to use the right-wing dog whistle of virtue signalling, but it's true. The virtue signalling liberals and fake left opportunists who don't talk about that because it's trendy to care about Palestine, and there's nothing wrong with showing your support for that. But they don't give a shit about Sudan, which is another colony that's been ravaged by neoliberalism and neo-imperialism. Not a word about that. Another thing I want to point out is, why is it all this opportunist fucking left in the UK who are admittedly rightfully calling out groups like ISIS, is the self-styled Islamic State, but they were calling out the Assad regime or government, or whatever you want to call it, for its supposed human rights abuses, which I think is true. Exaggerations aside, and chemical weapons attacks, some of which have been allegedly debunked, it's fair to say that the Assad regime was a neoliberal fucking, basically a Russian imperial puppet. You know, Russia, I mean, it's very trendy to go Russia baiting and everything. You know, you want to make somebody look bad, just name drop Putin and say Putin lovers and Russia, pro-Russian. Russia's just another fucking country. It's a neo-imperial country, but it's no worse than the UK, so fucking quit with that bullshit chauvinism. I'm no fan of Vladimir Putin, but when it comes to people like him and that arsehole in Kiev, Volodymyr Zelensky, who's nothing more than a NATO puppet, who's basically sold the country down the proverbial river, as they say, to the IMF and NATO. So there's no good guys in that Ukrainian war, and there's no good guys in the fucking inter-imperialist multipolar fucking Cold War that's going on. Stop trying to convince me that China's a socialist country. That isn't washing anymore. You don't have billionaire landlords at the head of the Communist Party in a supposedly socialist country. Sorry, mate. Ask a bunch of Africans what they say about what China's doing to their countries. I know shitloads of people from Nigeria. I know quite a few from Zimbabwe. And there's other people from like Tanzania. I think it was Tanzania, Kenya, other countries as well. And they all said that Chinese factories are completely devastating the economy, slightly less than the US and UK ones are. Now, because you're doing it less than the UK and the US doesn't stop you being a fucking imperial country. Just because you don't fit all five, or is it? Oh, sorry, all of it. Sorry, all five or all eight or whatever. However many points it is that Lenin talked about defining imperialism doesn't mean that you're not imperialist because you don't fit every single one. That's like saying you're not a fascist if you don't fit every last definition that coincides with German Nazism or Italian fascism. You're still a bloody fascist, even if you're not a Nazi. The same applies to imperialism and capitalism. It's bullshit, the whole thing. Sorry, the camera's going all over the place because I'm trying to not burn my fingers while I'm burning mouldy pieces of fabric. It's a shame to see it go, but needs must. Where was I? I'm always rambling when I'm making these videos because those fires are quite hypnotic, do you not think? Now, yeah, why is nobody talking about this new government? It's not called a regime anymore, it's called a government, as opposed to the former Assad regime, as they called it, which admittedly was deeply flawed and problematic, and I couldn't say I give any support to it, because as I said, it's just a bloody puppet of Russia, of the neo-imperialist, neoliberal, post-Soviet Russia. Poor old Lenin will be turning in his grave if he saw this shite that country has now descended into. Pretty much everything they fought for being undone, and we have bastards like Vladimir Putin and fucking people like Solzhenitsyn, anti-Soviet far-right lunatics like Solzhenitsyn turned into like national heroes. It's a tragedy. And the Russian flag, which is the pre-revolutionary Tsarist flag, being flown, just like the Ukrainian blue and yellow flag that was worn by Stepan Bandera fans and old Nazi collaborators in World War II, and worn as armbands by them. So don't go waving either of those flags. I've done that. I've talked about that before, though. Let's get back to Syria. Why was Assad this terrible, monstrous dictator who tortured people and oppressed all opposition? Which is okay, fair enough. But what we have now is a bastard who's affiliated with Al-Qaeda, a former head chopper, And as I understand it, they've been going on the rampage, committing genocidal acts against Alawites and various other, I can't even remember half of the Syrian Christians as well, who've been slaughtered in their thousands by these bastards. This new government has been participating in this. Why have the left said nothing about this? Not a word from the anti-Assad, supposedly revolutionary left in the UK, who are all cheering on the Syrian, the so-called Free Syrian Army. They were cheering that on, saying, "Yay! No to Assad, no to ISIS, no to Russia." Okay, fair enough. But yes to Al Qaeda? I thought they were the bad guys, or are they the good guys again, like they were in the 80s when Osama bin Laden was hailed in the British press as a national fucking hero, or an international hero of anti-communist cold warriors. I hate to quote 1984 because I hate and despise that book, and I detest and despise with every fibre of my being that fucking hack Orwell who wrote that piece of shite. But it has some truth when they keep changing who the enemy is. In that abomination of a novel, it was East Asia, then it was Eurasia. Now it's like Al Qaeda are evil. Al Qaeda are the reason why we must be afraid. We must have a war on terror. Oh, hang on, no, Al Qaeda are good again. Where the glorious, democratic, free current country of Syria has been liberated from the terrible regime of Assad. So they're good again. Now this was a top terror organisation. They've been taken off the terror list in the UK. Meanwhile, a group called Palestine Action, who sprayed a bit of paint on some fucking planes, are now classed as a terror group. I'm not going to say anything in their favour. I'm merely pointing that out. So I'm not going to say I support them. I do not wish to get arrested and charged with supporting terror and potentially sent to prison for 14 fucking years. But the hypocrisy of that, I think, is something I can say, and I will bloody say. Why is nobody talking about Syria anymore? Why is nobody talking about Sudan? But we still pretend we care about Palestine. But have you noticed they don't care as much now because allegedly the ceasefire happened? Oh, and of course this week Trump is now threatening the UK government with libel. Threatening them with suing them for libel, sorry. Oh dear. I keep hearing talk about Epstein lists and all this, so I need to look more into that. And I've gone on now for over 12 minutes. This fire's burning nicely, and I've demoulded at least some of the clothing in my wardrobe and under my bed. It's a shame to see it go, but hey, it's a nice little fire anyway. What can I say while this thing burns itself out? Are we really in such a fucking disastrous state? I mean, oh yeah, Mamdani, that was another one I meant to talk about. This guy he won a landslide victory as the mayor of New York. Lots of people are cheering this on, but have you noticed how he's already, as some articles I've read said, bent the knee to Zionists and imperialists? He's apologised for tweets he's made about the NYPD and their violence and brutality and racism. He's now apparently appointing Zionists on his. I don't know how the system works in the city mayor government in New York or any other city in the US for that matter, but I believe he's now given jobs to proud Zionists, and he's now bent the knee to the Zionist lobby. Some of the Zionists have told him to fuck off. And my answer to that is you shouldn't kiss the arse of bastards like that. They're not your friends. They are vindictive bastards. The best that you'll ever be to them is what they call a useful idiot. You cannot change capitalism by joining it. You cannot reform it. You cannot bring about a revolution through electoralism. If voting changed anything, they would ban it. When will you fucking people realise that? I understand the left is in such a devastated mess that we're desperate to find some little bit of hope to cling on to, but for fuck's sake, you don't do it by pretend radical leftists whose answer to everything is taxing the rich. I keep seeing left-wing influencers on YouTube and TikTok and fucking Instagram saying, tax the rich, tax the rich. If you try and tax the rich, they'll just run away and leave the country. If you force that onto them, they'll send in fascist private militias to murder you. Any progressive movement gets either hijacked by the Democrats in the US, the Labour Party in the UK, and the Social Democrats across Europe, or they're basically murdered and denounced as terrorists, even for doing things like rape, even for doing mere little acts like spraying a bit of paint on a jet plane that was sent to participate in genocide. When will you realise that you cannot fucking just sit around waiting and doing passive protests and voting for one politician that gets very quickly bought off by the same bourgeoisie that they claim to oppose? Similarly, back home in the Irish Free State, we have a new president, Catherine Connolly. Now, she seems like she's quite good. My mother speaks quite well of her, and so do other people I know and family members, I believe. She was once involved with the Connolly Youth Movement and the Communist Party of Ireland. But again, she's already started condemning, I believe, I understand she condemned Palestinian resistance and condemned the October the 7th attacks of 2023, which I think is a very dodgy thing to do. I mean, nobody likes violence, but it's not even clear who did what on that day because there's so much bullshit and misinformation that was used to justify the subsequent genocide that followed that. Now, she may be well-meaning, and I'm not going to sit here and trash talk her or anybody else for that matter, but I am not going to sit here going, yay, we've won a victory, now comes the revolution. Okay, maybe somebody can get into power, soften the blow, but that's all it is. It's softening the blow of right-wing capitalism. I mean, Ireland, it might be a bit more, it may have more significance than it does in the United States, but I doubt even more than that, because ultimately all she's done is join the establishment of the Irish Free State, which masquerades which has tried to pass itself off as a republic since 1949. What a fucking joke that is. No, anyway, I have to keep some hope that maybe she'll tell Trump and his imperial attack dogs to shut the fuck up. So apparently she's pissed them off already, so there's that. But I don't hold out much hope. Always you see these people paying tribute to right-wing bloody governments abroad. I understand you have to play the bloody political game, but you shouldn't have to play bullshit games just to stay in power and try and reduce the damage that the capitalist system does to poor people. It's only one section of the working class that really benefits from it, not the rest of them. I can't believe I'm still having to say this in November 2025 and the age of 54 as I am now. But it has to be. I have to keep saying it because people keep repeating the same old mantra that we're going to win something by voting for people like Mamdani in New York. It's not happened. It won't happen. We were told in 1998 that we'd have a united Ireland by 2016. That's nearly 10 years later. We still have no sign of that. We still have... I mean, Sinn Féin are now laying wreaths to the British Army. Sinn Féin, who once wouldn't be seen dead on TV wearing poppies, along with the Free State fucking compradors in Leinster House, laying wreaths of poppies to the fallen dead of the British Empire and completely ignoring the Irish rebels who died for the Republic. This is what they fucking died for. Yous bastards are a disgrace. You call yourself the Republic of Ireland, you're nothing but a bunch of comprador Free Staters and Westbridge Shonines. Fuck all of yous. Fuck your poppies. If people want to wear a poppy because they have somebody in the army that they lost and so on and so forth in some war, then fair enough. I'm not going to begrudge that. But don't demand that me as an Irish diaspora person comes from the community that was bullied, brutalised, and my own grandparents witnessed the Black and Tans 100 years ago. Don't expect me to wear a fucking poppy to commemorate them. I will commemorate war dead on it from any army except war criminals. I'll never commemorate them. So anyway. Burn the mold, burn capitalism. Viva la revolución, hasta la victoria siempre, and so on and so forth. I hope something happens soon and not just more fucking electoralism. I've withered on here for nearly 20 minutes now, so I suppose I'd better leave you with this dying fire, and I'll say to you all, it's Misha and Punk Finin Jarag, Slán Gafol, Agus Canadian Boher Liv Galair. Take care of yourselves, and don't give the fascists an excuse to kill you. Bye for now, comrades.